Hey guys, welcome to Cyberhuman Frontiers, June 5th, 2021. Thanks for joining us. And we are going to get, we're kind of changing tack a little bit here. I won't go through what we've covered for the last few weeks, but we're going in a slightly different direction, and they all kind of come together at a point. Before we get into it, let's go through our community guidelines disclaimer. I will try to read it as fast as I can. The purpose of this video is not to incite fear or violence, nor harass in any way, but rather to share and exchange thoughts with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject. This is to encourage conversation and awareness. The opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the persons expressing them and are not a representation of the channel, Cyberhuman Frontiers. None of our videos claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice, and the content is created entirely for your entertainment. This video and our channel in general may from time to time contain certain copyrighted works not specifically authorized to be used by the copyright holder, but which we believe in good faith are protected by federal law and the fair use doctrine for one or more of the reasons noted here below. It should be noted that we make it a practice to try to thank and acknowledge the other content creators whose work we feature on our shows from time to time. We will be doing that tonight, and you will find those links always in our show notes below the video. So, hey guys, thanks for being here. We're going to have some fun. It's a new exploration. TMC, how you doing tonight?
Andy, I'm great.
Good.
Thanks.
All right.
How are you?
I am okay. Yep, I am
You sound
fine.
tense, buddy.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, we deal with what we have to deal with. Sometimes in the cyber world, things don't always follow the exact plan or schedule, but we persevere and eventually we get things working right. So tonight's subject is Wi-Fi nanochips for humans. And I'm going to start off with, and when we're talking about nano, immediately the subject will come to mind. I think most people have some familiarity with what we mean when we're talking about nano anything. But we're going to just want to make sure that we do know exactly what we mean by that. So I'm going to do a little bit of description and just show a few illustrations, and just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of the scale and the size. And I mean, really, it's pretty cool stuff. So anyway, right here, we have a picture of a colloidal nanomolecule. Now, a colloidal molecule is something which is an aggregate of a bunch of atoms. And for chemical reasons that are characteristic of them, they have either been built or they like to, in nature, stick together and form a colloid particle. Colloid particles of the size of what you're seeing on your screen right now they do qualify as nanoparticles. Specifically, this illustration, it was probably an experiment or, something that was synthesized in a laboratory. It's an aggregation of lead sulfide, and the lead sulfide is what you're going to most like. I'm pretty sure what they're using as the code for the lead part and the sulfide part is the yellow dots on this, and oleoamine, which are what you're going to find as the blue and red colored molecules are on this. Now, I may be misquoting it a little bit because I didn't design this diagram. And then finally, you will find hydroxyl ligands. So that's one depiction of a nanoparticle. Now, when we're talking about size and scale, exactly what are we looking at? Well, I think I'll save the best for last. So I'll go right to this one. All right, this is a cell, a human mammalian cell. And I'm not gonna bore you with the numbers, talking about nanometers and nano this and everything else. Suffice it to say that depending on how small or how big it is, there are either more or less zeros after the number that's the digit for the size of the thing. So we're looking right here at a red blood cell, approximately the size of 100. A red blood cell is 100x. A mammalian cell 8x, a bacterium 10x. We go all the way down, just to make this simple. We go down to something really, 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 really small, and we go down to the size of an atom. So if we go back to diagram number 1, what we're really looking at is molecules, and those are composed of atoms, and they make up the bigger thing. Now I've got a diagram that's going to make it all simple for you. This grayish black thing, the grayish black circle around the edges, is a period that would be on a printed page. If you imagine that within the space of that period, and we were now to take a look at a cell, let's take a look at a cancer cell, it would be of some of the larger variety of cells that might be in an organism, all right? And a little bit smaller than that is a bacterium. So you can see the relative size of a period and a bacterium. Now that bacterium, you could probably fit 100 of those inside of a period, right? Okay, now we go a little smaller, and we go to the size of a virus, all right? And that is now very, very small. Maybe you could fit, I'm just guessing, maybe you could fit 500 or 1,000 of them inside of a period, a lot of them. And finally, the size of a nanoparticle. So talk about nanoparticles, and I want to be brief with this because we got so much good stuff to get into. This is just by way of background. The term is sometimes used for larger particles, and a lot of virus particles are in the range of, and they'll probably say it right in here so I don't misquote anything else. The diameter of an atom is between 0.15 and 0.6 nanometers. Very, very, very small, if you remember the size of that period on there. And I'll go to another explanatory right here, just trying to be quick and brief, because I know you guys know all this stuff, all right? The links to these, if you want to read them, they're in the show notes. Nanoparticles, and in terms of diameter, fine particles cover a range between 100 and 2,500 nanometers, and ultrafine particles are between 1 and 100 nanometers. Nanoparticles typically are in this range, the 1 to 100 nanometer range. Nanoclusters have at least one dimension that is between 1 and 10 nanometers, wicked, wicked small, and a narrow size distribution. And there you go. And then they go into a little bit about nanoparticle research, which we don't need to get into right now. Lots of uses for these things, and the science, the material science of making nanoparticles has progressed quite a bit. It's been a subject of, I would unreservedly say, quite robust research and well-funded research. Some of the things that these can be used for when they are properly designed is for creating fluorescent labels. Those labels can be affixed to biological molecules. By fluorescent, it means that if you hit them with the right kind of energy, they're going to glow. They'll show up on an electron microscope. They will show up in some sort of other imaging system that can see that small pinpoint of light. And it can be used in research relative to diseases, or perhaps re-engineering an organism too. Can be used for drug delivery systems, gene delivery systems, biological detection of disease-causing organisms, and diagnosis. The detection of proteins. How? By designing a nanoparticle, a nanomolecule, so that it would have an affinity for a particular protein. So you put that nanoparticle into the organism, and it's going to want to seek out a particular kind of protein and bind to it and stay there. So then you use it, you go and look for that nanoparticle, and there it is. We're specifically going to be talking a little bit more about nanoparticles that have a feature of their characteristic that they are magnetic. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about magnetic nanoparticles and magnetogenetics tonight. And this is one branch of the whole field. So the nanoparticles themselves they can be either organic or inorganic or a combination of both. We're going to show you some of the technology which enables, believe it or not, biological nano-networks to be constructed, accessed, manipulated, measured, and ultimately controlled. Nanotech is a really, really important field, in terms of both the life sciences as well as completely unrelated in terms of design of computer circuits. Nanotech has an application there. And there's some merging right now between using nanomolecules and being able to make computers with them as well. The next step in miniaturization. And I believe that in that area, you're going to find some blending of organic and inorganic molecules in that area. Again, though, tonight, focusing on magnetic nanoparticles and magnetogenetics. We'll be doing this. It's kind of the foundation for a few episodes that we're going to do. So anyway, there we go with that. They've been increasingly used in drug delivery systems, et cetera, et cetera. I want to go to a little video here, which just to get your curiosity going and just so that you're thinking, wow, this is wild, crazy stuff. My goodness, what is this? And let me find that video. It's here someplace. Okay. The title of this is March of the Microscopic Robots. Dun, 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 dun. Here they come, March of the Microscopic Robots. This is in your links if you want. It's not a really long video, so it'll probably play mostly the whole thing. This is from Nature Video, March of the Microscopic Robots. And here we go. Okay, hold on, strap your seatbelts in.
These are the legs of a tiny army of robots. So small, they are dwarfed by a single-celled paramecium. 50 years of development in microelectronics have given us a fantastic array of tiny computer systems. But that is only half the puzzle. A robot also needs to move. And now, researchers have created a brand new type of actuator which can do it, giving the tiny brains some brawn. Up until now, making
So get the significance of that. You know, if you visualize any sort of an object that you use that's, you know, a latching, think of it like a mousetrap, you know, I mean, it's like an inch, couple inches by 3 inches. All right. Well, they're talking about making actuators, something that can be electrically controlled or controlled by other means, which will perform a mechanical function. And it's really, 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 really small.
some brawn. Up until now, making moving parts at the micron scale has proven tricky. Conventional designs often don't function very well when they're that small, while others work, but rely on mechanisms like magnetism, which can't be easily integrated into existing electronic systems.
What you see right here is an iron doped, in other words, magnetic atoms doped into a polymer, and then this thing is being subjected to a magnetic field, and it's being made to flatten out and curve. So that's a plastic, you know, along the lines of a polymer with the appropriate flexibility characteristic, and it's got something magnetic in its composition. And that's what they can do with that. But once again, this is primitive. He'll show you more.
But the new design, called a surface electrochemical actuator, can be fabricated using similar processes to those used to produce microchips. That means the tiny legs can be added directly to the devices that control them. To make the legs, a 7 nanometer thick sheet of platinum is coated on one side with an inactive material like graphene. The legs are then patterned using a technique called lithography, and the excess material is removed. In order to work, the legs need to be in water, but the concept is relatively simple. When a current is passed through the platinum, charged water particles are attracted to the uncoated surface. The force of these particles binding to the metal creates stress on one side.
Keeping in mind for life applications, you know, in an organic world, such as a body of a mouse or a cricket or a human, there's plenty of water in there. And it's possible to charge it and discharge it and make it do things in specific locations. So this is not science fiction at all. This is really doable stuff.
Side of the sheet, and that is what makes it bend. By reinforcing sections of the sheet, the bending can be controlled more specifically. And voila, a tiny...
Why am I thinking of paper airplanes here where I'd, you know, want the rigid part of the paper airplane to stay so that it wouldn't just flop all over the place if I tried to throw the plane. And then other parts, the wings had to catch air, so they had to be big and wide, but, you know, they were only banging against air, so they could basically loft the whole paper airplane. Here, folding to reinforce or reinforcing so that they can predict how the thing is going to fold. Very cool.
Robot leg. The robots are equipped with 2 minuscule solar cells. By shining a laser on each one, researchers can create the voltage which activates the front or back legs. These new actuators
Something very elegant about this stuff is when something is very, very small and it needs power, it's going to need very, very, very trace amounts of energy, whether it come in from electrical sources or electromagnetic sources. Just keep that in the back of your mind. These very efficient. The smaller something is, the more efficient it is in this world of what we're talking about, powering an actuator.
Actuators allow the tiny circuit to move, and because they are created using the same well-understood manufacturing processes as semiconductor electronics, their production can be easily scaled, making millions of tiny robots at the same time.
Now, you remember the size of that grain of salt, and he scaled it next to what one of these things was, and that was at the current state of material science as of August 26, 2020, as of this date right here. So, it's always getting better, right? So,
Andy, I got to step in. Yeah, that's not necessarily true. That's just when the video was put up. The footage and or technology or the reporting could very well be from technologies that have been developed way before 2020.
Yep, you're right. Good point. Yep, it was just uploaded on that date. Exactly.
Yeah, the other piece that I wanted to add was when you were talking about ways to stimulate nanorobotics at this, you talked about electricity and electromagnetics.
Yep, or light. If the thing had a little tiny photocell on it, it could actually be powered up with light.
It's part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and that's the example that they used. They were shining a laser on the front legs or the back legs to get them to actuate, just to illustrate how it was working. But ultrasound is another way to remotely power something. Sure. It's just done through piezoelectricity, basically, or through a heat exchange of some type. Anyway, those are the two things that I wanted to add.
Yeah, it's very, very, very germane to what he's illustrating here.
Swarms of robots so small that they can be injected through a hypodermic syringe and collected using a pipette. Now, at the moment, they can't do much, but their compatibility with existing microelectronics makes them versatile. In theory, new actuators based on these designs could be combined with more complex devices to carry out a whole range of more sophisticated tasks. The researchers have pointed to everything from fighting cancer to tackling crop pests. But that is decades away. Time will tell if these...
I honestly don't think it's decades away. I seriously don't. When you see what we show you in the rest of tonight's discussion, I think you're going to think that it's not decades away either.
First small steps for microrobots could be a giant leap for microrobotics. One small step for robots, one large step for medical science, cyberhuman computer merged interface. Who knows? Use your imagination. Do you have anything that you want to jump in and show, or would I want to go to another potential video feature? It's a little bit more detail about nanoparticles. It's a little bit more long and technical. And, you might want to take over on the technical part.
If you've previewed this and you've got a couple sections, it'd be good to just show this is a real thing, and that people that have a lot of degrees in chemistry, biology, biochemistry, nanotechnology, computer science,
right,
on and on and on.
For example,
they all talk about
this. This is simple chemical formulas that I studied 40 years ago or something, and I really loved it. I loved chemistry, and I won't get into it too much. But if you wanted to make iron-based, iron-doped particles, and you wanted to figure out how to make Fe3O4, this would be one way to do it. And once you've got that, then the next step is trying to get that to latch or bind onto a biological molecule. I'm not even going to play this video. That's just an interesting formula. At one level, it's really pretty simple. The trick is to get it to bind with a biomolecule and not make it a toxic molecule so that it can be absorbed into the cell and it can stay part of it. And yeah, I have previewed this a little bit. So we're going to go to, oh, I know what I got. I got this one right here. real simple and fairly short. So this is scaled to basically, to the high school level. There's education going on in this field at high school level and certainly at college level. What are magnetic nanoparticles? And feature done by Diana Borka. I think she did a real good job. And once again, the link is there. I'm going to run this, and you'll see. I think you'll find it pretty easy to absorb.
Did you know that engineers also create things to make people healthier?
Hi, my name is Diana. I'm a professor in Mechanical Engineering Department at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I'm working on magnetic nanoparticle heating, which has application in cancer hyperthermia.
Deanna studies different methods to help people with cancer. To do this, she works with nanoparticles. Nanoparticles are really, really small particles, about 1,000 times smaller than a single cell. The ones Deanna works with are also magnetic.
So magnetic nanoparticle, it's a tiny magnet. They're used to locally generate heat in cancer treatment.
Wow! So these small nanoparticles can generate heat? How do they do that?
So that nano size allows them to be able to flow really seamlessly through the blood vessels of a body. And if they're magnetic, you can start steering them and making them go where you want them to go.
If we put a magnet near the nanoparticles, they will line up with the magnet. If we want the nanoparticles to move, we can move the magnet and the nanoparticles will follow. If we want the nanoparticles to move quickly, we can use an alternating magnetic field. The nanoparticles follow the magnetic field and move to always align with it.
We'll just mention one type of an alternating magnetic field is what we find with some of the RF stuff that's around us. It's all over the place. The 2.4 gigahertz, that is electromagnetic radiation. If you were to utilize that as the energy source for these nano-sized particles, they would actually be vibrating back and forth very, very, very fast. And depending on the amplitude or the strength of the field, you could generate an appreciable amount of heat.
If the alternating magnetic field moves quickly, so will the nanoparticles. When they move quickly, they start getting hotter and hotter. If they're in the body, this can increase the temperature of the tissue around the nanoparticle, which is called...
Really good illustration there. So if you've steered these things to a part of the body. Now, she's featuring the idea of using these to get them into a place where there's, let's say, a tumor or something, okay? And that they're going to get these in that location, and they're basically going to use them to cook the tumor. But because they steered them so precisely to that tumor, it's not going to cook your kidney, which is right next to it, that type of thing. So good illustration.
Hyperthermia. This can be very helpful when treating cancer. Let's look at an example. This boy has a tumor, but doctors are going to help him by using magnetic nanoparticle therapy. First, the doctor injects the nanoparticles directly into the tumor. Since the nanoparticles are really small, they move randomly around the cells. Now, the doctor puts the tumor in an alternating magnetic field. This makes the nanoparticles move very quickly, and if they move quickly, they will start to get hot, really hot.
But I would add something that before the doctor applies the magnetic field that's going to make them hot, the doctor or doctors would also have the ability or opportunity to be able to use a lower frequency magnetic field to entice or to coerce those magnetic particles to go to a certain area. And then once they know they've got them in that certain area, they use a combination of fields to keep those particles captive in that area, and then start applying the higher power and the higher frequency.
Not necessarily.
Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, well, the what you're showing right now is like 101 basic. Well, let's inject nanoparticles inside them and then put a magnetic field on it and watch them get hot and heat up the tissue, and that's all fine and well. But the reality of it is this. They know where to put this stuff, and they're going to land it. And if we get far enough along, we'll be able to illustrate where they're able to dope this stuff with genetic information or peptides or something else that's biocompatible that the body recognizes, that is target specific, cell specific, organ specific, issue specific, if you want to talk about therapy, and then the therapy is delivered with the use case of magnetic nanoparticles that ultimately have a greater amount of control available to the administrator, meaning the doctor in the case of therapy, right?
Yep.
It's not as simple as just let's get some magnetic nanoparticles and put it in the body and just let it go wild. That was a long time ago, and that's what's being illustrated in that video.
Picture this design. You take this, which is a very simple way just to make a magnetic nanoparticle, but now do a multi-step synthesis where you've made this particle, and now in your next step, you make it so that it will bind to a particular genetic part, a genetically active part of a cell.
It's one way to do it. It's one way to do it. Let me take share real quick. I want to show you something.
Yeah, okay.
If I can, yeah, it's this one. I want to show you a patent that I found in my notes from a minute ago. I'm pretty sure.
Barcoded. Cool. They're barcoded. Okay. Wow.
So this patent, it talks about layering nanoparticles, layering particles. It's a method for coating particles, core layer by layer. And so this whole talk you've been given about like making iron, if you will, at the nanocell, formulating it and then putting it into something that, in this case, we're trying to visualize nanotech. And you're right, it's toxic to the body. This would do that. They would make something that is magnetic, responds to a magnetic field like iron, and they would encapsulate it layer by layer by layer
in a lipid, in a fat globule.
Yeah, well, they talk about using a lipid, but they talk about using other stuff too. And the example, one of the examples they do use is actually, in this case, is a lipid. But dang it, it zoomed on me, man. It's all right. I'll just refresh the page. So the bottom line of it is this: there's many different ways to do the nanotech, and it's way more sophisticated, just a simple little insertion to the point, right?
The example she had was just getting something which is almost a raw, unshielded, naked ferrous particle.
Yeah.
But you can take it many more steps. If it's beautiful. Fat globules are really handy for insulating whatever's inside the fat globule from whatever, the body antibodies might come along and try to like wipe it out or something. But if it's fat globules that are akin to what would be in your body anyway, then those things may be able to hide out and not get swallowed up by the immune system. And they can eventually get to where you got to get them to.
So they talk about that in here, using lipids, polyethylene glycol, and others to do exactly that. Make something biocompatible so that it moves where it needs to go and do what it needs to do, like something across the blood-brain barrier, for example. But really, what I want you to take away from this brief interlude, if you will, from the video is when we're looking at basic concept of nanoparticles, in this case, nanomagnetic particles, it's going to be something like this, where you've got the magnetic component built into the particle, but there's also other elements, and the other elements could be something like making it biocompatible on the outside. It's not toxic to the body for a long time. That means that it could rest in tissues and live there or stay there for weeks, months, years, who knows? And these other layers that you're seeing in here could very well be other compounds, other chemical compounds, other metal alloys, other dielectric materials, other polymers. It could be genetic material that after a period of time, the outside layer breaks down and dissolves and the genetic material opens up, or that's done with change in acid or pH in the body or temperature, or it can be done with ultrasound or electromagnetics, all of that. The possibilities are endless with respect to can do. So here's an example. If you had nanotech in your body that was a nanomagnetic particle that also had material that was responsive to vibration or ultrasound, that also had another layer on it that maybe emitted light. It was that had a quantum dot compound that was also layered on the outside of it. And this is the essence of this patent by MIT. It's patented this particular technique to create very symmetrical, identically reproducible, high-grade nanotech that offers compound functionality, where you can take different energies and transduce them through the nanotech to provide some complex change, whether it be a conversion from magnetic to electric, or from sound to light, or electromagnetic to sound. Like I said, the possibilities are endless with respect to how this stuff can be constructed to ultimately manifest when it's used for therapy.
You know, the ideal thing would be, the ideal thing would be to import genetic code in the form of RNA or DNA into an organism, so you could get its cells to start grabbing some of the free-floating elements that might be magnetic ions that float around from time to time through the body, and incorporate those into a functional little molecular subunit. So you actually could get the cells to manufacture a kind of a little magnetically sensitive tag and just have it sitting there waiting for the proper electromagnetic stimulus for it to do whatever the next thing that it's going to do is. And that's not outside the realm of possibility.
There's a lot going on in the nanotech space. It's revolutionizing. Every industry is impacted by nanotech. It's really that simple. In one way or another, nanotech is really influencing every facet of our lives. In this particular article, it's about the use of nanotechnology to evaluate mental health and to use for clinical treatments. And they go into the various things that are currently used, and then what's applicable with respect to the use of nanotechnology for things like psychiatry. And what they talk about here is some of the things that are universally essential when you're talking about trying to interface at this scale in the body. It needs to be bioavailable. You have to have a way to deliver it, and it needs to be effective, right? And then what's going on, right?
And it needs to be talking about it needs to not be attacked by the body too.
Yeah, and so you could somewhat incorporate that into the metabolism as it relates to a positive or a negative effect with respect to how the therapy is responding in the body. And what they're talking about here is chemicals, but they're talking about the delivery of this stuff at the nano scale, which means use of nano delivery vehicles, platforms at the nano scale to deliver something like therapeutics or chemicals, antidepressants or 5-HTP or SSRIs, etc. But all of this at the nano scale, and this notion of magnetogenetics and or nanoparticle play, because at that point you can start using something like an electromagnetic field or just a magnetic field to start influencing how you deliver these therapies. And this is all the general stuff that you're going to be looking at when you're looking at nanotech in the body in general. And like I said, these are just high level. This is the kind of stuff that has to be dealt with so you don't get toxicity when you deliver iron failing to speak to cell tissue. The body would seriously reject that. Remote control of ion channels and neurons through magnetic field heating of nanoparticles. So that video,
look at that.
Yeah. So that video is great, right? Because it provided a 101 Crayola basic intro level of, hey, this is how this works. You get nanotech and that's magnetic. You put it in tissue and then you put it in an electromagnetic field or a magnetic field and it heats up and it kills cancer. Great. It's a wonderful story, but that is just one simple rudimentary application of this type of tech. More complex applications would be doing something like this. Let's deliver magnetic nanoparticles that do an electric conversion. So a magnetic field would stimulate the nanoparticle and it would then emit an charge, or the nanotech would be stimulated and it would emit light, or magnetic nanotech would be stimulated and it would generate heat, like we saw in the video, or the magnetic nanotech would be stimulated and it would generate torque, generate pressure, because you have something there that is being influenced by the magnetic field causing a twist or a pull or a push, right? Yep. So you have heating, you have twisting, pulling, and pushing, you have an electrical conversion, and you have a light conversion, and you all So we'll leave it there with the possibilities of how you can use an electromagnetic field and transduce that energy into something useful that the body understands and will interpret as communication. And in this example on your screen, remote control of ion channels and neurons through magnetic field heating of nanoparticles. And what this is exactly what you saw in that video, but instead of injecting it into little Johnny's arm to treat the tumor, right? What this is the same concept, but much more sophisticated, applied selectively to specific neural populations, either in an organ, adjacent to an organ, onto a part nervous system, because they all have unique characteristics. So you could find each one of those, or specific centers in, and when you can and build nanotech that is able to site select, target select where it's going to go and land, you can do things like take a part of the brain and say, we want to be able to stimulate this part of the brain whenever we want, and we want it to do this. Knowing those things, if that's the objective, you can do something like
that's going to be electrical or chemical.
In this case, with what's on the screen, you would drop off nanoparticles that are designed, when they're in use, they're designed to heat up to cause stimulation. And this paper talks about how that works. There are specific ion channels that respond to heat. And it's important to know that, because that's how your body cools off. That's how your body understands, hey, I'm touching a hot stove and burned right now. Your body responds is very sensitive to heat. And this is not just topical skin. Your organs respond to heat. Everything in your body responds to heat, because the primary component of how you stay alive is regulating your body at 98.6. So when part of your body is not at a comfortable 8.6, or whatever your resting temperature is, whenever it's not at that level or at that temperature, your body is now sending signals to say, hey, the temperature is not right. Well, what's going there is it's literally
all right,
sending signals based on responding to heat or a lack thereof. That's just one example of how heat works. Like I said, or temperature, sweating, all of that stuff.
Hang on a second. Zooming out to the macroscopic understanding of this whole thing. What we're talking about is building purpose-designed little nano-sized machines, extremely small. Now, if we were to choose to build little machines that would mechanically go in and literally be steered and targeted toward a tumor or cancer cells, they could be little choppers. They could be little mechanical choppers, all right? And they'd just chop it up. They'd eat it all up and disable all of those cancer cells. If it were something that was a purpose-designed machine with an electrical or chemical feature about it, then those could be steered ideally to something such as neurons. And now we're going to have an electrical interplay or a chemical interplay with the axons or the dendrites on neuron. And we can either inhibit or excite neuron firing. And then I guess there are probably a few other examples. We could go to the chemical, we could delve into what some of the endocrine organs do, the ones that secrete endocrine chemicals in the body, and that would be another type of machine that we could build. So it's electrical, mechanical, chemical, and that covers neurons, endocrine systems, or perhaps mitigation of tumor growth, things like that. So purpose-designed, tiny little machines. And if it's electrical, I'm still calling it a machine, even though it's not primarily mechanical. I'm still calling that a purpose design.
A machine would be anything that performs some function that's I don't even want to say by itself, but it's just something that it's something that does work, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, however you find work. So we've gone a lot down, almost an hour at this point, right? Yeah, down this lane of nanotech and trying to stay somewhat on target with magnetism. So I'm gonna add a layer, Indy, before I'm gonna hand the reins back over to you, because right. I don't really want to be a hog, but all this talk about magnetic nanoparticles being administered through something like an injection, right? Or an inhaler or something you might drink or eat. Synthetic stuff, now we're going to take it to the biologic. And what this says here is magnetic of cells or cellular processes, meaning stuff that goes on inside of cells, using biofunctional nanoparticles. And biofunctional nanoparticles are simply a real fancy way of saying they add genetic code into your body so you grow magnetically responsive proteins, and they are already in place in your cells. And the things we've been talking about, being able to manipulate biologic function, magnetic fields, becomes possible after this stuff is literally grown using your own cellular factories to do so.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is talking about here.
Exactly.
In this, yeah. So it says remote activation of cells.
I think we should read. I think we should read a lot of this. This is really right on point.
This is the potatoes of really what the future holds for. It's one example because you have optogenetics, thermogenetics, chemogenetics, sonogenetics, mechanogenetics, optogenetics, lots and lots of combinations, electrogen, lots of stuff that are related to this idea of applying genetic code into an organism to use the organism's machinery, biomachinery that does things like cell reproduction, right? Jack that, if you will, or to use that machinery and to build something that isn't naturally built in that organism. So in this case, we're talking about adding code to do things like gets to express magnetic proteins so that those proteins respond to very, very, very level magnetic fields. That's what we're talking about. And if you can go so far as to allow your mind to wander, imagine for a moment that you can add genetic information that allows for target site selectivity based on genetic programming. So you don't necessarily need a protein, a peptide, a whatever attached to it. You actually put it into the genetic code so that the genetic code is inserted into the organism and it proliferates, only expresses when the right epigenetic characteristics exist. And that can be, it needs to be in a liver cell or it needs to be in a heart cell. And only when it's in that organ, then it can do what it's supposed to do. Then it can come alive. Then it can be retrieved, and whatever it's to do can be done inside the cell. And just because it's in the right organ doesn't necessarily mean that this is more complex. When it's at the right place, you apply a remote trigger, and a remote trigger can be a biochemical process in the body, something like you eat, and it creates this chemical reaction that changes your body's pH, happens to do it in and around your, and boom, that's a trigger. Or you have a rapid rise in temperature, and that rapid rise in temperature might only be in a particular target spot in your body, like an organ. And for a brief period of time, a rapid rise in temperature that isn't high enough damage to tissue might be enough to trigger the reaction. Again, a remote trigger. Same thing with ultrasound. If you can get the right resonance or the right vibration at the very, very specific level, granular, right? You can now start resonating at the genetic level where you can resonate proteins, you can resonate genes, specific genes, different lengths of DNA, if you know what you're looking for and you know what the sequence is that you're looking for, that has unique resonant frequency. It has a unique resonant signature.
I would imagine so. I would imagine that certain parts of a DNA molecule will have certain frequencies that they will ring at and other ones that they won't. And by ring, I mean vibrate at. And and they're not all going to have the same exact resonant frequency. So once again, precise tuning, if you will, and precise focusing of the energy.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it real quick. And I could show you. Yeah, it's right here. So I'll be able to show you if it loads quickly.
Good.
So here's microwave resonance therapy, and I've taken some information out of it, but I'll show you this is the patent for it. Like I said, if it loads. And what this really is going to illustrate is the possibility. This is not the one, dang it. This one talks about bioaction potentials.
Oh, see if you can find the one you're looking for.
Yeah, I'll look for it. I'll look for it as we put through, because what I said was I got to be able to back that up. But it's really a real thing.
There's
One more thing.
plenty that's important to keep in focus in the overview of this whole thing. By the way, hi guys, see you all out there in the chat. Really good to see you. There are some parallels when we're at this level of sophisticated intracellular, nanotech designed with a purpose that's intracellular. We are now at that level of RNA and DNA and being able to manipulate or change the expression of certain parts of genes. And it's, our show is for educational and entertainment purposes. And, but you are free to connect all the dots that you want about what applicabilities there could be. And you're also free to compare and contrast everything that we're showing you, which basically is, it's all man-made, it's all engineered, it's all designed. And that whole ballpark versus what is the natural side of life and what it does without, this type of stuff involved in it. And then, draw your own parallels and make your own opinion and formulation of what you like about it, what you don't like about it. That's for you to do. We're just here showing you what they're working on and building. And I think you found it.
So here it is. Methods for determining therapeutic resonant frequency. What this patent talks about is just some dude, right? But when he gets into the fundamentals of how this works, he breaks down the actual mechanics of it. And we're not doing that here. I encourage you to read this. The patent is on the screen. Should you want to read it, just look it up.
I'll try to get this link into the show notes. We'll make sure we get it in afterwards so it's there for people.
What it says here is that they describe in this patent how to efficiently determine resonant frequencies that can be used therapeutically or beneficially or to debilitate, right? Specific types of genomic material, including DNA and RNA.
And gene sections.
And gene sections.
This is like one step better than having to go in with CRISPR and do it. This is more elegant than that.
If you can get the sensitivity and granularity and sophistication
that you need.
This is where 5G, 6G, 7G is going to go. This is where it's going to go. And what it is this fusion of networked homes that have the power lines network, that have the lights network, that all of your connected electromagnetic wireless, like we understand today, all network together. They all function in real, where the latency is less than like seconds. We're talking like latencies. So what that means is be able to potentially smart meter.
What TMC means by that is response time. The response time is very quick.
The latency to have the wires in the walls talk to your phone, your TV, everything all happens in the millisecond or sub-millisecond time scale. And what that allows for is your entire home to become a laboratory. And what I mean by a laboratory, you have smart meters that regulate the wiring diagrams in your house. Those electromagnetic fields can oscillate and have major amplitude opportunities as it relates to the amount of power that flows through your walls. Oscillate that. Electromagnetic fields extend beyond just your living space. They extend for a long way. They're very low frequency. You're talking 60 hertz. Those extend a long way. So you have this stick electromagnetic field that, when I say static, right, you have a known 60 hertz. And then back on top of that, the ability to modulate communication over power lines, because you have to have a connectivity, right? You can look up MIMO, multiple input, multiple output over power. And what I'm trying to share with you there is that they can modulate information, therefore the amplitude, the frequency potentially, right? And or the polarization, right? Or the phase of the power, the energy flowing through walls. And it's that sophisticated that they can modulate and change the characteristics of being broadcast as just the ambient electromagnetic field oscillating and pulsing of the wires in the walls of your house. That's where the laboratory is connected to the internet. And that provides very good, clean, isolatable environments where the environment inside that electromagnetic field is variable. And it's somewhat isolated because that electromagnetic environment has a unique signature and can potentially overpower a lot of other stuff, making it its own little nucleus, right? Then you add in the electromagnet from the router, the TV, the phones, the tablets, the computer, all that. Every one of those antennas all working together in perfect harmony. You have a cloud-based central computer that has command and control over dozens and dozens of electromagnetic generators. And when you look at the way electromagnetics work, you stand, or you can read this for yourself, wave convergence that do things like cancel out electromagnetic energy, or it amplifies electromagnetic energy. And because we're talking about antennas that do things like send information over the internet, they're scalable. They can go from 0 hertz up to 300 gigahertz. And then on top of that, so complex electromagnetic systems. You have a stable environment from the wiring with the smart meter that's able to generate stable electron fields from the wiring in your house. Sophisticated is up to you and where you want your mind to go. Then you have the lower powered pulsing, chirping, right? Quadrature amplitude modulated and other forms of modulation coming from your modern communications devices. We haven't talked about lights yet. This gets really, really creepy because infrared light is emitted out of the LEDs that they've mandated over the last year or so. This push to LED, this push to black fluorescence. You know what's in a compact? The compact fluorescence creates plasma. And when you push electromagnetic energy through plasma, you get some very interesting effects that occur. You get a very unique property. It's almost medical grade, but that's a whole other topic. This idea of using plasmas and interfacing electromagnetic energy into plasma to generate the right wave characteristic that has both it has both sound waves and basically electromagnetic waves all in one. And then you can apply that to the body, and it does some very, very interesting stuff. You can look up Thomas Bearden if you want to look up some interesting rabbit hole of that stuff. Thomas Bearden. Okay, back to light. The light passes through the body, it bounces off the body. If you have a light system in your house, in this laboratory, right, that is able to interface, particularly LEDs that are able to interface in the infrared scale, your body wants the infrared light. Infrared light passes through your body. You can pulse modulate infrared light and start doing things like brainwave entrainment and that, where they apply infrared light into the ear or the eyes, and it literally gets your brain tuning on how they pulse it. It's a thing. We should do a show on it. So the bottom line is, with the connected house, right, with the walls and the antennas in the phone and all the connected devices and the LEDs and other light systems, you have a laboratory that you're exposed to and you're living in. So what the lockdowns ultimately, in my view, have provided, it's provided an opportunity to do something like introduce foreign genetic information into the internet through various mechanisms, and then study in a laboratory environment while everybody is quarantined in their own little nucleus, study what's going on. And this is how we're going to move forward and ultimately merge these new ideas and these new concepts that are coming online with like quantum computing, material sciences, nanotechnology, and all this stuff kind of fusing together in giant soup of modern technocracy. So there's my ranting monologue for the show. Good.
It's pretty good. Couple things just to add to supplement what you said. The focusability of some of these electromagnetic waves, both in terms of whether you have a couple of coincident waves coming to a particular place at a specific time with a particular energy level and frequency, is well within the capability of current technology. And somehow, we haven't figured out exactly how, but we're going to stay on it. That is related to the 5G basically 5G means
way more than that.
Generation.
Yeah, what it really has to do
to that. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was that LED lights are vastly different from old school incandescent lights. I'm sorry, TMC, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to help clarify. It's not specific to 5G. It's way more than that. Quite frankly, most of the stuff that is useful, it's already deployed. It's Floyd. All the 5G really does is tie it all together so it talks real fast. So you have low latency. You need the low latency so you can drop your power levels and you can get the sophistication the way you need it. If you have high latency, then you don't get the sophistication that's needed to do what needs to be done, even if it's to move information over the internet for something as simple as video. I mean, what the 5G is designed to do is ultimately automate and make communications as instant as possible, irregardless of what the communication is. Irregardless of communication is. Yeah, and back to the therapy piece, man. It really the therapies as they interface as this whole show really is centered around how energy really impacts the body. And all of my research has really led me to this. It is the low frequency repetition that interface the body. And so there's two P to understand here.
TMC, make sure that you got good signal. You're cutting out just a little bit every other few digits, every other few words there.
I'm sure I am, because this is not good stuff to be talking about. You have the frequency that's being used, but then you have the number of times that frequency is applied to an organism, and that so is a frequency. You can have a 2.4 gigahertz wireless signal, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. You can have that frequency, but then you can have that frequency hit a biological organism at an elevated level or 6 times a second or 10 times a second. And to get is 2.4 gigahertz that has an amplitude modulation, 2.4 gigahertz with an amplitude modulation of 6 hertz or 10 hertz. And the body understand that 6 hertz or 10 hertz. If you can get your mind wrapped around frequency versus the number of times that frequency is applied to an organism, and that also being a measurement of frequency.
What we're talking about, guys, is combined frequencies. Picture one frequency and then there's another one riding on it. And the first frequency is the carrier or the deliverer for the second one. So the first one's needed to get the distance and to get it to your body. But the second frequency is the one that is actually something that, let's say, bioactive. It's one that's at a frequency range.
So you want to stay between 1 and 500 hertz approximately. And this is just what I've read from the medical patents, because there's electromagnetic patents all day long about using incredibly low, something that your cell phone can put out with the Qi wire charger, the dual or triple or multi-coil wireless charging apparatus in the back of your phone has the same hardware components that exist in the medical patents that do things like regulate irregular heartbeats or reduce pain or osteoporosis or clean your blood or regrow bone or regrow nerve tissue or do things like send signals to the occipital cortex in your brain. All of these things are possible with the hardware components that exist in a modern device today. It's just a matter of how it's modulated. And the frequency stuff is just one piece. So when we talk about 5G, it's not, oh, 5G's got the frequencies, they're going to hurt me. No. Some of that's true, yes. There are studies out there in Russia. The USSR has done lots on EHF, and they did it back in the 80s, a little bit earlier.
For the most part, what most of those higher frequencies will do basically is just cook you. That's mostly
no, that's not it at all. This is the sophistication of magnetics. How they are applied to the organism has much more to do than what frequency is actually applied. You can easily cook some with microwave radiation. That's easy to visualize. It's much difficult to do something like go in and resonate a particular genetic structure out the body to induce something like an inflammatory response that we're going to call, polka dots and rainbows. It's way more sophisticated than
cooking.
Just a 5G frequency, touch your body, you're going to get hurt. No, that's not it at all. It has to do with frequency that's out there. If applied to the organism properly, can be used for therapeutic purposes at very low power. And that's not discussed. It's not at all looked at in at least publicly acknowledged by organizations like the FCC. They simply say, stay in the ISM band, stay under these power levels, and do whatever you're going to do. Oh, and by the way, if you want a permit, it's a lot of money. And if you don't lobby well enough, we'll go ahead and give the licensing to somebody else.
Right.
Never what the adverse health effects are. Never mind when we have technological breakthroughs like, hey, we just figured out, like, it doesn't matter what frequencies you use, but if you oscillate them at 10 hertz, you're going to get people to sit in front of something and drool a little bit. You're going to put them in a real suggestible state. It doesn't matter if you oscillate sound waves at 10 hertz. It doesn't matter if you oscillate wireless Wi-Fi signal at 10 hertz. It doesn't matter if you oscillate the near field sensor on your phone at 10 hertz or the wireless charging apparatus.
It's no wonder that FCC regulations are way behind what would be more appropriate modern safety standards, given the level of technology that's coming out.
Dude, Google and Apple, everybody else are fusing together with pharmaceutical. That's why you have Google buying Fitbit. That's why you have pharma and biotech all fusing together. Back end, big tech is there with them. The reason why this isn't regulated is because they want it wide open like the Wild West globally, because it does a few things. It stimulates innovation, keeps costs down, and if you share this information globally, particularly on back channels, there may not be considered reason, you get things like sharing technologies to countries that don't have moral and ethical standards. I have more magnetogenetic stuff, dude. I mean, I have pages of links that talk about the studies of how they inject genome into the body of mice and other things, worms and flies and other stuff. I mean, this stuff's available. This is stuff you can find online free, publicly, right? So it literally talks about inserting genetic code, allowing a period of time for the proteins to express that are then responsive to magnetic fields, and they do things like control flight or control fear or control geneticality, like make them go left or right or spin in a circle. The sky's the limit, man. The sky's the limit.
I'm just communicating with the chat right now, so go on.
All right, sure. So I'll still share. We'll get back on track now that we've
and we almost don't have to, but relative to certain technologies, I mean, I do have a video that is on YouTube that I don't see why we would somehow sacrifice our own viewership based on playing someone else's YouTube video. But you never know. I want to
share this.
Okay.
I want to share this.
Probably safer to go with you've got than what I've got.
Let's look at barcoded nanoparticles to understand, like, if you're not dealing with the genetic manipulation thing, if you think that that's not possible and that's not happening, great. I bet you sleep much better than I do. So let's go back to, hey, they made this thing, like, because we can, we have an iPhone. That's pretty cool. We can make that. So why couldn't we make something that's incredibly small that, can do things like barcode your cells, and they can barcode how disease and how inoculations kind of move through the body. This talks about delivering nucleic acid therapeutics, and they don't really know how to track them, and they don't understand necessarily how they travel. They mix around. So what they've done is come up with a cool way to make, here it is right here. We sought to develop a system that increases the number of nanoparticles testable in the body. To increase the throughput in the body studies, we use rapid microfluidic mixing to encapsulate nucleic acid barcodes. They're using DNA. They're just building DNA, and they're barcoding it. They're barcoding DNA in the body so they can track the DNA in the body. This is barcoding genetics and potentially putting genetics in the body. They're talking about in vivo, in the body. This is barcode. This is a mark. This is a genetic mark. What's about here? Just illustrate that here. Rapid microfluidic mixing systems to encapsulate nucleic acid barcodes, genetic code barcodes, DNA, inside of nanoparticles, and then administering them to a single pool to mice. So one injection through a IV directly somewhere, right? Or direct body. Not even an IV. Intravenous, intramuscular, we'll find out. Maybe they'll tell us. We recovered the barcodes from tissues and cells and used sequencing. So they sequenced the genetics of the tissues and obtained counts for the barcodes in each sample. Sequencing is a high throughput, cost-effective method to precisely quantitate nucleic acid species. I wonder if this can be done with something like what looks like a PCR test. What looks like a PCR test. I didn't say a PCR test.
Yes.
What looks like a PCR. So rapid throughput sequencing of barcodes after you provide something in a single dose into an organism that then is allowed to proliferate through the organism. You then sample tissues, i.e. take genetic information, and you sequence it, right? Cost and method to precisely quantitate nucleic acid species. It has led to the identification of molecules or peptides with specific biological activities and enabled pooled screening with different components of material, RNAs and DNAs, right? By associating specific nanoparticles with unique DNA barcode sequences, they can now reliably measure biodistribution of many nanoparticles in a single animal. So what did they do?
Absolutely amazing. I want to say, can I say something? I just want to say to everybody, guys, we're showing you what is written. It's in print. It's patented. But we encourage, without us saying a whole lot, we encourage you to connect the dots and see how these interrelate to what you've learned about our current environment today. Let's just say that. That's for you to do. We can only go so far. Okay, go ahead.
So this Wi-Fi chip that was the title of the show is not just little pieces of metal that people think they're getting stuck in their arm. It's way more sophisticated than that. Realize the different mechanisms by which we communicate. Ultrasound, your phone, and your TV all communicate with ultrasound.
Let's blow up that diagram. Let's blow up that diagram a little bit and really look at that and go through step by step to illustrate.
So communication is possible with many different mechanisms. Communication is possible with many different mechanisms. And as long as you understand that it doesn't all have to happen over a cable connection or a twisted pair connection or an electromagnetic wire connection that we understand as a cell phone. If you understand that it can be done with light, it can be done with sound, it can be done with the pulsing, the on-off of anything. It can be heat, it can be acid, it can be chemical, it can be anything. That can be communication. Then you can start getting your arms wrapped around how the different ways the body communicates at the cellular level and the different ways that humans have been studying facing with those different communication mechanisms, putting technology in between the communication mechanisms so that it can be measured and stimulated, whether it any of the previous ways that I've mentioned. So how do we do that more effectively? How do we do that in a sophisticated way so that the stimulation over the network through something like a cell phone that can generate ultrasound, magnetics, laser pulses, sound, the phone can do it. How do we make a universal Wi-Fi chip for humans? We do it through genetics. That's the most sophisticated way. And why is when you turn around and get in the sheet, it's cold, and you make that friction and out pops baby 9 months later. Guess what? Baby's wired up too. And you now have a species that has this moving forward through time. And I'm not even going to tie in the interdimensional aspects possible when we start hooking up quantum computers, biological quantum computers known as a brain. Who knows what could happen when you do something like that? But it all starts with this, right? Understanding how to track nanotech, whether it be genetic nanotech or synthetic nanotech or a hybrid of both. This is meat and potatoes. Very, very, very possible. You can research this all day long on the internet. This is any and all genetic research at this point tracks what they're doing. If you're doing genetic research at this point, these are staple toolkits at this point. You're learning and studying and developing genetic therapies to track what's going on with what you're doing. So this is not a new idea. This has been around for a long time.
Oh, yeah. We're talking decades. Yep.
Yeah. Long time.
So, guys, keep in mind, there's something I have to say, which I will say, but you know why I'm saying it. This show is for entertainment purposes only. And just reiterating the disclaimer of our purposes, under no conditions to incite fear, stress, or anything else along those lines. It is purely for your entertainment and to encourage conversation between like-minded individuals, which we're having right now. And let's keep doing it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Do you want to take it back out to a higher level for a minute?
Well, let's see. Where are we on the clock?
We've been down in the weeds for.
Yeah, no, it's not in the weeds. The dots can be connected by people. The last 15 minutes of the show, we will bring out some products and items that you can get that can help you with protecting yourself and shielding yourself. But what I got right now, if I find out which tab it is oh gosh, it's over here. Okay, and I haven't decided how much of this I will let play, but well. Let's play a little bit of this, all right? And, this is just kind of where we're going, and I'll certainly give credit to the creator of this. And then I have another one, which is more along the lines of what can be done by some of the companies that make medical chemicals, i.e. pharmaceuticals, that type of thing. But I'm not going to go with that. I might not actually play that one on this show. We have a ton more stuff than we're going to actually show, and we have to try to make a judgment as to what's best and what's safest to play as well. But we got all the links there in the bottom of the show notes for you if you're interested, and you can watch these to your heart's content at no risk to us or yourselves. So what we have here is this little thing. So brain implants, what's next for neurotechnology? And so now this is sort of fleshing out some of the background, everything that TMC was just giving us more specifics on. And we're going to play a little bit of this. And I have another one which is shorter. We may get to that. Here we go.
Devices implanted in the brain could bring untold medical and technological changes to society. Neural implants are already used to tackle conditions like strokes and epilepsy. Scientists say these devices could help to treat dementia, Alzheimer's, and even enable paralyzed people to walk within a few decades. But tech experts predict brain implants may one day allow us to add new capabilities too, such as telepathic communication. Large tech firms have expressed an interest in joining this neural revolution.
Large tech joining the neural revolution. Did anybody's ears perk up? So this is from Roundtable, all right? It's 2 years old, and the title of it is Brain Implants, What's Next for Neurotechnology? Roundtable, all right? And thank you very much, Roundtable, for creating this little info blurb here, info piece.
Elon Musk's company Neuralink aims to start human trials in 2020 to insert ultrafine electrodes into the brain to help people with paralysis communicate via a computer or phone.
I just want to mention one thing. From our assessment of it, what he's been working with, at least at my last review of it, was not the most advanced level at the forefront of this technology. Just saying.
But ethicists are worried that corporations and governments may access our deepest thoughts and feelings. The Royal Society in the UK has called for a national investigation into.
So this looks like something pretty powerful here. If you can imagine, you've got this many input-output sources on a brain. And now if you could take these and not have to have it be wired like that and have it be much more, I don't know, sleek, sexy, and ubiquitous, but it's connected somehow, quite a lot of potential power in having that. And if it was done at the level that TMC was just featuring earlier in the show, at that subcellular level, well, that's really, really, really powerful. And they're working on it, but they're not there yet.
To emerging neural interface technologies. Campaigners hope to establish safeguards so as technology uncovers new possibilities, it develops in a safe and ethical way.
Okay, who's in charge of developing the safeguards? I'm not going to say anymore, but you can think about it.
Joining me from Barcelona, we have Neil Harperson back with us, described as the world's first legally recognized cyborg. You can see that thing on the top of his head. It's a device connected to his brain to help him perceive colours and light. He is, in fact, colourblind. Ross Dawson joins us too from Sydney, a futurist who investigates advanced human technologies, and with me in the studio, Stephen Rainey, a research fellow in neuroethics at Oxford University. Stephen, this raises an awful lot of ethical points. We'll come to those in just a moment. But Neil, since you were last on Roundtable and you told us about the colors that you can see, the lights that you can perceive. You've come up with something else that's going to go around the side of your head. Tell us about that.
Yeah, now, you know how this is done. They have found a way to interface with the visual cortex of that man's brain somehow, whether it was in a nerve bundle that goes from the eyes back to the visual cortex, which is in the rear of the skull, believe it or not, or whether they did it right at the back of the skull. I haven't seen the whole picture of how they put this appliance on him, but anyway, it apparently is working.
Yeah, I'm interested in sensing time. We all have a sense of time, but we don't have an organ for the sense of time. So it's going to be an inner crown around the head. It will be a point of heat that will slowly go around the head, and it will take 24 hours to do the complete circle around the head. So this new organ will allow me to feel the 24-hour cycle of the rotation of the planet as a body part. So the aim is to see.
So he's getting a new sense. He's getting a new sense that we weren't born with. Very, very fascinating.
Even in the long term, when my brain gets used to the 24-hour cycle, if we can create time illusions. So if I want a situation to last longer, I'll make the point of heat go a bit slower or a bit faster so that maybe we can play with perception of time.
Do you think that's going to be possible, that you could slow things down so much that a minute could last for 24 hours?
I think it's possible, because in the same way that we can create optical illusions because we have an organ for our sense of sight, if we have an organ for our sense of time, we should be able to create time illusions. And when you're looking at an optical illusion, even if you know that you're looking at an optical illusion, your brain is fooled by the optical illusion. So I think that I can actually create time illusions if I have an organ for the sense of time.
Okay. Ross, let's come to you. Is this the sort of thing that you're thinking about as well?
Well, coincidentally, it is. And it's a little bit of a different view to the ways in which we interface with the world. But back the very distinguished hypnotherapist Milton Erickson looked a lot at time distortion. So this is where we are looking at uncovering the potential of the human brain. And one of the ways we can do that is start to, of course, tap directly. We can augment it with building in different ways. But I think just in more broadly, we are very far from uncovering the potential of our mind. And I think time illusions, time distortion are some of the things which we've played with very little, but where we have had some foundations of success. So I think more broadly, if we look at how do we augment our human capabilities.
Just to add something, where we have an individual right now who has been able to have restoration of color vision, that's done with a semiconductor sensor, which is converting what it's seeing out in the environment, which is colors, which is some part of his physiology and his the way that he was, whatever it is that happened to him, he can't see it anymore. You would want to realize that it's an extremely small stretch to be able to design a different type of a sensor, a transducer, so that a person would be able to input other types of stimuli, other types of information into any part of the brain. In this case, it's the visual cortex, but let's just go science fiction for a minute. We can't see X-rays and we can't see infrared. We use night vision goggles to be able to see that. But the idea of stretching this to the point where you'd be able to have night vision built in, it's nothing. I mean, it's doable. It's absolutely doable now. With the interface that he's got, combining that with the type of sensor technology that's in night vision goggles, you've got it built right in, right on board in yourself, in your body. You might have to have a wire sticking out of your head, which has the sensor on it, but who knows? They can advance that. They could perhaps build something that would be at the forehead or something else, as they alluded to. He goes on.
And that's both within our existing mind, but as well as augmenting it by, for example, interfacing with computers, being able to add new sensors, as Neil is doing, and exploring new ways. So I think this is all about human augmentation, augmenting our cognition. And, I think what Neil's describing is, one of the many paths that we can take to do that.
Yeah, and this...
we'd say that this was science fiction and that it's like, 100 years out, it's 500 years out. But my goodness, we're seeing the kind of deployment of some sort of thing beyond a prototype that actually works now.
This is presumably just for the interest in finding out what these possibilities are. But when it comes to the practicalities, I've made notes of helping the paralyzed to walk, sharing your thoughts with somebody else, making prosthetics easily controllable by the brain. Is this where it could benefit humanity on a ground floor level?
There are many people today who can be vastly aided by these new neural interfaces. And of course, those who do not have full, the traditional capabilities that we have in terms of physical movement can use their brains to more directly control the world around them. That's a very obvious interfaces. There's many other medical applications beyond that. One of the real things saying many people want to augment their capabilities for enhanced performance, to be better at their work, to be able to achieve more in their art, whatever it may be. So from this base of being able to aid those who are not normally abled, we can now look to say anybody can choose to augment themselves in different ways. And this is, of course, where some of the ethical issues start to arise.
This is where we're going now. We'll talk about the practical side of this, both with you.
All right, so you guys see how we made a subtle shift in the show here? We were talking about things at the subcellular level and showing you the level of technology and what they're working on and perfecting at that level. But this field is so huge because this is related to that, and this is just another look at it from another angle.
Neil, and with you, Ross, as we go throughout the program, and throw your thoughts in at any time you care to. But Stephen, one of the concerns is who are the right candidates for this?
Yeah, I mean, talking about augmentation of abilities is one thing, but because we have so many opportunities to help people who are profoundly disabled.
Well, now, wait a minute. If some people are going to be augmented and others aren't, doesn't that create some sort of an issue? I'm just kind of wondering about that. These guys they're going to go on for 26 minutes. I think I'm going to go. We can come back to this if we get time, but there are two major elements that I want to get to here, and I don't know if we're going to have time to do all of it. But let me just take you to this one, and the title of this is this: Wireless Linkage of Brains May Soon Go to Human Testing. So this kind of substantiates a little bit of the idea that this stuff is here, and it could come to an institution near you sometime soon. Who knows? This is from Rice University and is from their neuroengineering department.
This project started because the government was interested in developing better ways for us to connect to the brain. So we have this massive amount of data coming in, massive amount of data trying to go out, and they've been thinking, how can we make it more efficient for us to communicate? Normally, when we think about tapping into people's brains, we're like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like, I don't want to have some kind of surgical implant or microchip or something like that. And it's really not a viable way forward if we're just talking about a healthy subject or a healthy person, a healthy soldier trying to control his or her drone better. And so, given this fact that we want to be able to communicate more quickly with our external device, we don't want to have surgery. Can we come up with a non-surgical way, an external device, a helmet, a hat, that would allow us to capture signals from the brain and stimulate the brain as though we were sitting in front of a monitor?
And you know that we're already sort of getting beyond the idea of needing a helmet or something like that. We're already kind of going beyond it. I'll leave the title up here so you guys can see it while he's talking.
Something about that, Indy.
Yeah.
The idea of the helmet, there's benefit to having a helmet, and it does a few things. It could provide shielding for foreign signals, number one. Number two, it provides an opportunity to have an enclosed space for encrypted comms. So you could have local body area comms that have more sophisticated systems that are designed to communicate, for example, quantum encryption on the battlefield that would go to local areas and then ultimately up to a satellite, right? And that would all trickle down to the soldier, like this guy's talking about, interfacing with his mind using his drone. That drone is now on the network that ultimately ties through a new encrypted military style network that ties a general through a private that ultimately has access to what's on the video feed of his drone.
Right. Central command center for monitoring and interaction, as well as the person out in the field. all
Yeah,
that.
so keep in mind, we're talking about networking this drone to the brain. So the general theoretically would have access to the brains of his troops. So your chain of command would now have access to being able to stimulate your brain for training. They're not just going to hand you a drone and give you a shot and say, here, go have fun. They're going to use this technology to make you as lethal as possible.
As effective as possible.
Unless you're in the modern Joe Biden military, right? Where you can,
don't go there.
Yeah.
All right. So what he's going to do is he's going to help to normalize and depolarize the idea of this, and make it pretty non-threatening and very, very useful. So let's let him talk a little. It's a short video.
And that's the big idea, this non-surgical neural interface. So it sounds a little wacky. Is this even possible? And so we began by simply looking at what are the physical processes we could use? What are the techniques that might give us the ability to communicate with the brain through the skull? So we started this in a very exploratory phase, and we looked at how we might be able to use magnetic fields and how we might be able to use light. Both of these things can penetrate the skull, and we wanted to understand if signals from the magnetic field and from light would allow us to record and stimulate the brain.
As the magnet turns on.
So this is all stuff that we've actually gone into greater depth, but it's kind of a nice summary of how it can all be applied and what people are trying to do.
The flies are stimulated, so we're working to stimulate their brain using nanoparticles that I've already injected into the flies.
So when people hear about programs that are designed to build a brain interface, particularly programs funded by the government, people naturally get concerned. And what I want to make clear is that the systems we're developing are really designed to help patients. The long-term vision is that maybe these technologies could help people who are healthy individuals who might want to have a better way to control a drone or other autonomous vehicles. But most immediately, what we're thinking about are ways that we can help patients who are blind. For example, individuals who have lost the ability to see, what scientists have been able to show is that if I stimulate parts of the brain that are associated with vision, those patients can get a sense of vision even though their eyes no longer work. And so the technology that we're developing now are technologies to stimulate the brain in specific ways. And specifically, we're stimulating.
Just keep in the back of your mind, visual cortex is only one part of the brain. There are thought centers, there are ethical centers, there are, of course, the auditory cortex, taste, sight, sense, smell, all that.
Wait. You can't forget speech, Indigo.
So I did forget speech.
We've got to keep speech free. This isn't. I'm being facetious, but I'm not being facetious at the same time. This technology will be. Think about what Facebook and Google and Twitter and Apple do with their curation, with their censored platforms. Okay, we're looking at video of Rice University in partnership with DARPA, government programs that he's talking about. The program he's talking about is DARPA N3. It's the N3,
exactly.
non-invasive, non-surgical neuroscience, right? So you have the N3 program, and you have a half a dozen or more other neuroscience programs that Rice University, their neuroscience department, and their electrical engineering department, and others get lots and lots of money from DARPA and IARPA and other ARPA-type fund resources. So this is huge that they're coming out literally earlier this year, just after Joe Biden was inaugurated, saying that they're going to link up everybody's brain, that they want to link up everybody's brain and do it with light and magnetic fields. And guess what your phone has? Guess what happens as you sit in front of a laptop? Guess what happens when you sit in front of your phone? I will record a video very soon that shows the iPhone infrared lasers, right, constantly pulsing, even though Face ID isn't working, and it's designed as a proximity sensor. And what that means is that thing pulses to understand what's going on in the environment, so the iPhone can give you a better user experience. But the reality is that light, as this guy just said, is able to stimulate the brain. is able to stimulate nerves, is able to go in and modulate your nervous system simply through your eyes, even though your cones and your rods don't necessarily physically process, or you don't recognize that they're processing infrared light. It's still stimulating your system. And that's not taking into consideration the fact that light passes through skull, like this guy admitted to, Rice University working with DARPA.
Yes,
right?
he did.
Light passes through the skull, which means that it's going to pass through all the tissue to get through the skull. So your veins, your arteries, your connective tissues, and most importantly, the nerves and things like your face and your neck. Those things are just underneath the tissue above the skull that have to have the light pass through it potentially to get to the brain. All that said, you can look up infrared light and stimulation of peripheral nerves, and you will find that at very low power levels, infrared light is able to stimulate the nervous system and do things like create involuntary compound muscle action potentials.
You can look it up in our previous episodes, and you can go to humaninternet.org, and you will find this information there if you have a hard time finding it yourself. Go on.
And I'm good. Let's finish. By the way, we started 10 minutes late, so don't think you're short on time. We have plenty of time.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah, so let's go.
Got this? Yep. Okay.
The parts of the sensory brain no longer work. And so the technology that we're developing now are technologies to stimulate the brain in specific ways. And specifically, we're stimulating the parts of the sensory system so that you can recover a little bit of your sense of vision. And playing that forward to what this might mean for people in the private sector, people in the military, this would be an alternative to your display. And so the idea is that we would have some kind of a helmet that would be able to stimulate your brain in such a way that you would be able to see as though you had a display in front of you, a heads-up display, so to speak, that would be activating the parts of your brain associated with vision. One of the things that has helped us be successful with this program is that Rice has invested a lot of resources in creating a world-class neuroengineering program. So the Neuroengineering Initiative has allowed us to build out new lab spaces where we can bring the people on the team together into one physical location. And students and postdocs can move between the labs. They can develop technology in one space and move next door to another lab where they can test it. And all of these facilities and the excellent people that have come in to join the initiative is really the reason why we've been able to be successful.
That looks like Rice University. You know, these are brilliant people. They're very specialized, and they've got their skills and the detail of what they know very well honed. And when they work together, they can do amazing things.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so DARPA, right? Government, NIH, blah, blah, blah. Right? Got it?
Yep.
Do you think that this is the end of their interfacing with the body? Do you think it stops?
Oh, no.
Do you think the warfighter stops with the brain? Or do you think that they have similar projects to do things like, I don't know.
Absolutely not.
Splice together human genetics with something like a woolly mammoth so that the soldier is more impervious to cold and can function at incredibly low temperatures and low oxygen levels. So high altitude, high cold, war environments. You could go in and genetically engineer a soldier so that after the course of maybe 3 months of a train up where you actually induce training in cold weather training up in Alaska, for example, if you're in the U.S., you go get your shots and you go train up for war in a winter environment, and you go to Alaska, and over the course of 3 months, you'd acclimate. And through that acclimation process, the genetic information that you were shot up with from the woolly mammoth, for example, would then express, and you would then be able to function on potentially a third of the oxygen at sub-zero degrees and do it in a t-shirt and freaking shorts. That is a dream of DARPA. So to think that this stops at the brain, and you think that countries are only stopping at the brain, that is just ridiculous, because it is to ultimately refine the human organism, to transform the human organism into a variety or into a plethora or into a palette of expression to then be accessed on demand in, again, a variety or a plethora or a palette of ways.
100%. 100% right. Yep. Well, taking us on this journey of what we would think would be science fiction, but it really isn't science fiction, we're going to listen to a little bit more of these guys. I may skip forward, but remember, you have the links all in your show notes below. This was from Roundtable. it was aired anywhere. It was uploaded September 25th, 2019. I'm not quite sure what the day was that it was created. And these guys started off their discussion talking about a person who has a visual cortex implant, which allows him to restore color vision as opposed to only the black and white, that for some malfunction of his body, it's all he had. Here they go. And now they're going to start talking about other applications of it.
A lot of the ethical issues that we have now is about how to help people build.
But Stephen, one of the concerns is who are the right candidates for this?
Yeah, I mean, talking about augmentation of abilities is one thing, but because we have so many opportunities to help people who are profoundly disabled, a lot of the ethical issues that we have now is about how to pick those people, how to develop which technologies and which directions. Because you have to remember that for a lot of these technologies like BCIs, they're brain-computer interfaces, they're very invasive. So it means brain surgery, it means putting things inside someone's head. So in order to get even those very fundamental questions right about who's the right candidate, it become very important.
Do you know, 20 plus years ago, I did a story.
What if something could be put into, well, quote unquote, into somebody's head, but much more invisibly or at a much smaller size scale, but still have the same functionality? What if it could be done very ubiquitously so that there's no white? Yeah, go ahead.
Do the ethical concerns apply when there's an emergency declaration?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know.
Ethical concerns apply? I mean, we don't. I mean, do you need FDA approval?
Yeah, good point.
You know?
Well, all right. I'm not. Nah, don't go there.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. And people can connect the dots on that because there's a parallel out there in today's world, here and now.
Hey, but you know what? We cured the flu last year. There was no flu, so it's all good.
Oh, TMC, you're killing me. All right, so here we go.
About a brain implant for a Parkinson patient. And he demonstrated to me that if he pressed he was like this, his hand was going like this, seriously. And he pressed a button on another machine, and it was difficult for him to do so. And pretty much immediately, it stopped.
Yeah.
You don't hear very much about these things anymore. I know it still exists, but why aren't they widespread, commonplace?
Yeah, this is deep brain stimulation is the technique for Parkinson's. And partly why you don't hear so much about it is that it's not very well understood, other than it works. So it's kind of a tricky one to recommend. The ethical issues around it become, we have an ethical duty to do these things because we know they work almost. You need to protect someone from the...
There are a couple of areas involved here is, how far do you go in changing someone from what their true nature is? There are people who have certain religious beliefs that preclude them from allowing any sort of modification or any sort of augmentation whatsoever. And they will just take whatever it is that is their ultimate fate. And, when they move on, they'll just go with that because that's a kind of a belief that they have and they're entitled to have that belief. But then there's the other issue of how do you decide who can have certain things and who can't? And it opens up a lot of questions that I don't know how they could possibly be resolved. I think the easiest way to resolve it is if someone was going to suffer a fatality, if they didn't get some sort of enhancement or augmentation, then you could say, all right, for humanitarian reasons, we're going to save their life and we have the technology.
Hold on. What if that fatality is not being able to get food because you can no longer get a job?
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
this is where this is going.
Yeah. So then, what we need to do is we need to import some new, job skills. Something that gives this person a way to support themselves in a way that is valued.
What we need to do is be serious. We need to be serious about having ethical discussions. And what I mean by serious is like having meaningful discussions at multiple levels, because this technology fundamentally transforms our species. It doesn't stop in the brain. This is the entire organism we're talking about, which ultimately is the transceiver that connects us to whatever it is that makes us so damn special. This is a big deal. And nobody is talking about this.
We transformed our external world when we learned how to make fire. We transformed our external world when we learned how to make the wheel. We transformed our external world when we learned how to make auto cars and flying machines, et cetera, et cetera. This is a different frontier.
I take that back. I shouldn't have said nobody, because that's an absolute, and only Siths speak in absolute. So no, that's not true. We're watching people talk about it. What I meant to say is the discussion is milquetoast. It's pathetic. It's soft, weak, limp, lame, underdeveloped, stunted, runted, and retarded.
It is.
Case in point would be Congress going, "Hey, Mark Zuckerberg," this is last year. Mark Zuckerberg, really, do you still track your users with cookies?
Oh God!
That is a perfect encapsulation of how pathetic we are as it relates to how self-governance is applied to modern telecommunications infrastructure, big tech platforms, and the power that is wielded through the use of that infrastructure. That's really the value, and that's really the battle space is the land-based and now satellite-based infrastructure that comprises the real, tangible, physical assets of telecommunications companies and big tech companies. It's that simple. It's that simple. And in our case, the Department of Energy that really houses the real main brains that are the backups for land-based government shit. But that's all I'll say about that.
With just what we've shown and played for you guys that is out in the public domain out there for you to be able to see yourself, you really can connect some of these dots between big tech, the defense, industry, and other people who would wish to redesign society or redesign a human being itself. You really can connect a whole lot of dots yourself. And all of this, all you have to do is put the dots together from everything that we've got here for you to look at yourself, which is apparently, you can still see it. And it's still, it's not a crime for you to be able to follow the links that we put at the bottom of the show. Who knows? Maybe our whole show will get taken down. I don't know, but we'll wait and see. If it does, we'll put it back up. We have other platforms, but we won't cross that bridge until we have to. Okay, they go on a little bit. And you're right, TMC. This is a milquetoast discussion that they're having here, and they're not really dealing with what is the ultimate elephant in the room, which is it's a whole different thing from building
It's not these people, and quite frankly, it's really not even Congress. These discussions need to be had amongst the damn military and amongst the other militaries. The real people that keep the glue behind the scenes to keep the world from not imploding on itself. Those people need to have a literal come to Jesus moment for the human species, because we're out of time. We're here. It's being done now, and that's just my opinion. Entertainment purposes only.
Yep. I'm glad you said that.
We're here now. It's here. We're here. So
we are. It is where we're at right now. That's correct. It's not, we say science fiction comes true, but it already did. Anyway, we'll take a few minutes. You guys can watch the rest of this if you'd like. Would you like to switch over to just a little bit of a feature of some of the products that are available for people to shelter and shield themselves from some of those energies?
Yes, and while you do, I will look up the one piece of information I did not remember to look up because it applies to this section. So take your time, and it's very important. So please.
All right. I got it pretty well ready to go. I'm going to start off with something simple. And there are products out there, you guys, that you can get, which can, if you should wish to, help you to reduce the amount of certain types of electromagnetic radiation that you might be getting beamed at you in one way or another. And we're not here to endorse any products whatsoever, by the way. That's not our purpose, but we're going to show you some stuff. And I'll show you a couple little products, and we're not endorsing any manufacturers, any products in any way whatsoever. But this is one of what will be probably a multitude of things that are available to you, not for extremely high money, that you can get. Now, you've all heard about smart meters, and you've heard about the fact that they do transmit electromagnetic radiation, which somehow helps their functionality. But some of that electromagnetic radiation can get, it can inadvertently get beamed towards you.
So
there is.
I gotta add something here.
You got something?
Yeah, I don't really want to go too deep on like real heavy details on this stuff, just to know that it's here. Other than this, and this is why I needed to pull this other piece of information. When you're looking, no, please leave that up. When you're looking at this stuff, just because you see a metal shield It doesn't mean that it's impervious to all electromagnetic radiation. You're not going to put that back up?
I am. I'm getting it right now.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
This is looking at roughly 2.4 gigahertz. It's looking at 1 gigahertz, 900 megahertz, right? What this is specific to is Wi-Fi and smart meter range of frequencies. That's what this mesh is designed for. And so when we're going to, the reason I stopped you, Indy, is for this reason, is to set some context around the beautiful job that you're doing describing this stuff, but it's going to have more meaning now. What I want to illustrate for you is that no one material fixes all of your problems. There is no one solution that fixes all of your problems. And I'll still share for one moment, and then you can have it back, and I will try not to interrupt.
All right.
This is why. You have, in a modern phone today, you have wireless and cellular bands that are so far beyond what people understand as traditional wireless frequencies. And
look at all those channels that thing can transceive in.
You have two different models here. They're basically the same. There may be subtle variations, but I really don't think there is. This is for the iPhone family, the new iPhone platform.
They're very similar. I scanned it already. Yep.
Yeah. So you have 5G sub gigahertz and millimeter wave down here at the bottom, right? Under all models. And this is an opportunity to kind of expose people who haven't been exposed to this notion of 5G and how they think it's 60 gigahertz or one thing and not the other, or it's 5G because I see it on my router. And no, that's not what it is. 5G, one version, one flavor, is anything under 6 gigahertz that works together in dynamic radio fashion, what they call software-defined radio. So any wireless transmission that is sent out that's under 6 gigs that works together with AI and cloud antennas and cloud infrastructure. It's 5G, right? So you also have 5G up here, NR, right? And which is, you can look up what NR is, and I'm not going to go through all these bands. I encourage you to look it up because all of these bands are different frequencies and they stretch the electromagnetic spectrum. They don't stay at 2 gigahertz. They don't stay at 900 megahertz. They don't stay at 1.8 gigahertz. They don't stay in 700 megahertz. They don't stay at 5 gigahertz, which is what that 5G is on your router. That 5G on your router, when you see it next to 2.4 and it has the same settings and stuff, all that means is that it's transmitting at 5 gigahertz. It doesn't mean it's 5G technology. 5G technology is simply software-defined radio that is put out into the environment so that it's able to move from one frequency band to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next fluidly in order to manage network traffic efficiently so that you can get sub-millisecond or millisecond latency across the world, which means I send you a notification or I have a phone call or I'm linked with your brain and I'm in America and you're in Iran or you're in China or you're in Russia or you're in India or you're in Australia or you're in Antarctica or you might be in Mars. Who knows what kind of platforms we're working on when you talk about gravitational wave communication, scalar wave communication, when you're talking over standing waves. Going back to 5G, all it really means is that it's a new architecture, it's a new platform that's designed to seamlessly and fluidly move from one frequency spectrum to another. Fluidly, seamlessly, quickly, to build a platform that allows for multi-gigabit connections to be delivered with less than 1 millisecond latency around the world. Anywhere in the world, less than 1 millisecond, data goes from point A to point B at multi-gigabit speeds. And then now you take a modern cell phone and you say a modern cell phone has 4 antenna receivers right now. A cheap modern cell phone has 4 receiver antennas. If you look it up, technically it's 6 or 8, but it's in the software and circuit design. And you can start arguing that is not being true. So they advertise like a 4x2 or whatever. So 4 receive antennas. If you can send multiple gigabits to one antenna, now imagine sending different streams to each one of those 4 antennas to one phone. Now I have multi-gigabit times 4. All because I'm able to do something like move between one frequency and the next seamlessly and fluidly over a broad spectrum. We're talking about going from, let's say, 700 megahertz 800 megahertz, 900 megahertz, because that is the suite that will exist with the first responder network that AT&T has all 50 state contract for.
Yep.
That's part of their 5G first responder network, is that frequency band. And they do it on purpose because those frequencies travel far and they go through walls. And when you look at emergency response situations, you want that for imaging in like a collapsed building environment or a standoff situation. And you want that for rapid duplex communication in emergency situations when you're trying to transmit through things like fog and smoke and ash and debris and dust. Right?
That's true.
That's true. Why they went through under the Obama administration and moved everybody over onto like digital high def TV, because they cleared bandwidth in a broad spectrum so they can do something like offer wideband characteristics at a low frequency bandwidth so they can give it to first responders, police, fire, emergency, military, etc., to run complex advanced functions from something that they're wearing on their hip like a cell phone, and do a complete image and spectral analysis and have duplex communication with a highly sophisticated sensor platform known as an i12
at the same time. Yep.
Yeah, all in a cop's hand. And when you tie in the neural linking that we've been discussing tonight, that phone is going to offer all kinds of new tool sets in the COP of 2045. The COP of 2045 won't need a firearm. The COP of 2045 will be able to go into a situation, look at somebody, and tell the system to disable the nervous system, and the individual will just sit down without needing a command. Like you've seen the cops sit down on the curb, sir. No. Sit down on the curb, sir. No. Sit down on the curb, sir. Oh, now the guy's sitting on the curb. It won't even be like that anymore. Cop will walk in and they'll say, sit down. And the guy won't have a choice. The body will just do it and stay there, because AI will be linked to everybody, fused into the damn nervous system. That's where we're going with all of this, folks.
That's correct.
And that is slavery at its finest. So enjoy your caste-based system.
Yep.
So anyway, there's all these frequency bands. Your phone can scale between any one of these, run them simultaneously, run them congruently, run them through any of the antennas. You have multiple antennas, not just the ones that work for a cell phone. You have the ones that are used for charging. They run in their own frequency bands that aren't even listed here. They don't even list the proximity sensor frequency bands. They don't even list the bands that are used for near field communication. They don't list the bands that are used for wireless charging. They don't even list that. And they don't list the frequency bands that are used for the infrared sensing and the infrared LiDAR and the infrared imaging.
Not at all. Yep.
They don't list that to the public. You can look it up in patents, and even in patents, it's very ambiguous. It's written very ambiguously. And so much is left open to interpretation that anything that's really left open to interpretation really is translated in the real world
that's giving the industry
it's translated in the real world as flexibility for AI. And when we talk about the wild, wild west for the internet and cyber and what AI is, our tool sets, toolkits in this new wild, wild west of cyber, right? Any flexibility you have with respect to what's allowed to be done to the general public, all that means, right, is more opportunities for AI to achieve whatever the goal is that AI has been programmed to do. So there's a fine line between regulation and laws. And this is why these ethical discussions need to be had, because anything that is done or not done, ultimately codified into law, is going to have direct implications for the species going forward. And I say that to every government, most specifically to America, because we still are the beacon as the example, albeit not so good right now.
That's very true. We are
a multi-faced society. We have to acknowledge that before we can sort of unify whatever it is we're going to do as a group. And I say that as a group because the United States really is the melting pot. And it's indicative in our school systems. It's indicative in our corporations. It's indicative in our cross-pollination amongst different.
Well, why do you think that the United States is a leader? It's the shining city on the hill that the world looks toward. One of the reasons why is because of what comprises what America is built of. It is a representation of peoples from all over the world who have come here. So in other words, people in those other countries can relate to what goes on here because some of their own people are here.
Well, there's connection there. There's literal ancestral, genetic, and
there's that too.
Cultural connection as a result of countries being a melting pot, and that's a double-edged sword. It's good and bad, and a lot of that has to do with how the society implements grace and how they implement dignity, how they implement tolerance. And when I say that word tolerance, I use it almost as a proverbial double entendre, because tolerance is the mechanism that has been used to put us in the position that we are in socially right now. You have to be tolerant, and so you forego your moral and ethical compass. And at some point, your entire moral and ethical code is eroded away. Rather than finding a nice homeostasis for a society, in our case, a free and open society, it's always taken to the extreme. And so this placating to people.
You're right. Taking it to an extreme.
Yeah,
it's gone overboard. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, so we have some real issues, I guess, to get our arms wrapped around when we try to quantify this idea of liberty, privacy, and freedom under the new context of what of how we try to quantify or define our culture. Like it's not the way it used to be. It's just not. And we can try to revive Americana, right? American ideals and civics. Those ideas, those things must be done for our culture to survive. It has to be done. If it's done, we have a better chance of success. It doesn't mean we're going back to the 1800s. We're not going back to like before the civil rights. It's not going to happen.
Not at all.
What we need to do is learn from this period of time and understand how something like the civil rights movement can mutate and ultimately become the very thing that it was fighting in such a corrosive way that it is a more aggressive form of that proverbial cancer. And if we can learn that socially, right, from the last 50 or 100 years, I think going forward, when we're all talking to each other just by thinking, hey, I want to talk to so-and-so, and what are you up to? And, whatever, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If we can get through all of the BS that we can put bookends on, hopefully, most of it in the last 100 years, I think we have a chance as a species.
There you have it, guys. TMC, last words from you. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah, more on this topic. We're going to hopefully expand out a little bit and see what other, whatever it is that humans like to do to other humans. So stay tuned. See you next week.